The studio was cloaked in a heavy hush, the kind that magnifies the smallest rustle into thunder. A modest set stood ready, two sleek armchairs facing each other, a low table with twin glasses of water, and the warm, restrained glow of spotlights, lending the scene a theatrical intimacy. No audience, no applause. This wasn't spectacle. It was interrogation, disguised as conversation. Norah O'Donnell entered first, carrying her signature composure, poised, polished, empathetic yet precise. A journalist who knew the balance between warmth and steel. Moments later, Meghan arrived, gliding into her chair with a confidence that felt almost regal. Her face was neutral, practiced, as if every camera angle had already been rehearsed. "Thank you for being here," Norah began, voice soft but professional. "I know your time is precious." Meghan offered a small smile that never reached her eyes. "Well, I think the world deserves to hear the truth, don't you?" Norah nodded, letting the remark pass. "That's exactly why we're here, to talk about your journey, your challenges, and your hopes moving forward." At first the questions were gentle. Meghan spoke about her projects, her foundation, her vision of empowerment. She leaned back, hands folded elegantly. More lecturer than interviewee. But Norah had seen enough performances to recognize one. Her smile stayed, but her eyes sharpened. "There's been much discussion about your life since stepping away from the royal family," she said evenly. "How are you finding life in America?" Meghan tilted her head, gave a short, humorless laugh. "Refreshing. It's nice to be somewhere I don't have to bow to anyone." It wasn't the answer Norah expected, or perhaps it was the one she feared. Still, she pressed on. "And Harry? How has he adjusted?" A smirk flickered. "Better than fine. He's learning what it means to live free, not chained to outdated rituals. It's liberating for both of us." The pause that followed was thick, almost physical. Norah scribbled a note before continuing. "Some have wondered if there's been tension between you two as you navigate this transition." Meghan laughed sharply. "Tension? Please. People love to invent drama. Harry and I are stronger than ever. If there's tension, it comes from outsiders who can't stand our happiness." The words flowed smoothly, but her tone was brittle. A wall was rising, brick by brick. Norah tried a new angle. "You're often compared to the Princess of Wales, Catherine. Do you feel pressure from that?" Meghan's jaw tightened. She paused, eyes narrowing. "Pressure? No! Annoyance! Imagine being measured against someone simply because of who you married. Kate this, Kate that. It's laughable." The weight of the words shifted the air. Norah kept her expression neutral, though her eyes betrayed a flicker. She pivoted gently. "And your children. Despite your efforts to shield them, they've been in the spotlight. How do you navigate that as a mother?" Meghan leaned forward, eyes cold. "My children are off limits. The very idea that people think they're entitled to ask about them says everything about society's obsession with intrusion. Maybe journalists should focus on issues that matter, instead of kids." Norah held her composure, though the sting was unmistakable. The temperature in the room dropped. Cracks were beginning to show. She recalibrated. "Let's talk about your Netflix partnership. Reports suggest there were disagreements about compensation for a new season. Can you clarify?" Meghan released a polite but empty laugh. "Reports? You mean rumors? I find it fascinating how much energy is spent speculating about numbers instead of focusing on the message." "So, the reports are untrue?" Norah pressed. "Gently." "I'm saying," Meghan replied crisply, that whatever discussions my team has are private. Just because I've lived in the public eye doesn't mean the world is entitled to every financial detail. That's not journalism, Norah. That's gossip. The words landed heavy, the silence afterward heavier still. Norah's expression didn't change, but she inhaled slowly through her nose. She could sense it now. This wasn't going to be one of those calm diplomatic interviews that quietly fade into the archives. This was turning into a sparring match. "I understand your point," Norah said evenly. "But surely when you and Prince Harry signed one of the most publicized entertainment deals in recent history, you expected a certain level of scrutiny." Meghan's eyes flashed. Scrutiny or obsession? There's a difference. And let's be honest, if my name weren't Meghan Markle, nobody would care. But the moment a woman speaks up, suddenly she's difficult, demanding, or greedy. Her voice carried a rehearsed indignation that sounded almost theatrical. Norah folded her hands, her professionalism holding firm. But the tension between them was visible now, thin, stretched, about to snap. "Speaking of the public," Norah continued gently, "you've often said you value your privacy deeply. Yet your projects, from the docu-series to your memoir, invite the public into very personal aspects of your life. Some have suggested that's contradictory. How do you respond to that?" Meghan exhaled sharply through her nose, her smile now tight. "I think that's a lazy criticism. Sharing my truth isn't the same as surrendering my privacy. People seem to struggle with that concept. Perhaps they prefer their women silent." Norah's pen froze above her notebook. That last line wasn't just defensive. It was accusatory. She looked up, her calm mask beginning to show strain. "No one here is asking you to be silent, Meghan. I'm simply asking how you draw that line." "The line," Meghan said coolly, "is mine to draw." A silence followed, thick, uncomfortable, charged. Norah could feel it pressing in, the atmosphere shifting from conversation to confrontation. Still, she pressed forward, her journalistic instincts refusing to yield. "You've spoken before about the institution of the monarchy and the challenges you faced. Looking back now, do you have any regrets about how you handled your departure?" Meghan's laugh was dry, almost mocking. "Regrets? None. I chose peace over performance. I chose authenticity over servitude. Frankly, I think I should be applauded for walking away from a system that thrives on silence and submission." Norah tilted her head slightly. "Some might say that system also gave you the platform that allows you to speak today." That did it. Meghan's posture stiffened, her expression sharpened. The warmth she'd managed to maintain for the cameras began to vanish entirely. "Oh, so now we're giving credit to the institution for my voice. Interesting. You think I owe my visibility to the monarchy instead of my talent, my intelligence, or my work ethic?" Norah's tone softened, though her words remained pointed. "I'm only suggesting that your life changed dramatically because of your connection to the royal family. That's a fact, isn't it?" "It's your version of a fact," Meghan snapped. "The truth is that connection came at a cost most people can't imagine. Maybe instead of framing it as an advantage, you should acknowledge the trauma that came with it." The tension was now unmistakable. Even the crew behind the cameras exchanged uneasy glances. Norah took a steady breath and tried to bring the tone back down. "I do understand that it wasn't easy. But Meghan, surely you can see how people might view some of your comments about the royal family as what?" Meghan cut in, her tone icy. "As ungrateful, as bitter. That's always the label, isn't it? The outspoken woman is ungrateful. The quiet one is a saint. I know the narrative. Norah set her pen down slowly, folding her hands on her lap. I'm not trying to label you, Meghan. I'm trying to understand you. Then, maybe, Meghan said, leaning forward. You should start by listening, instead of assuming. The air went cold. The politeness had officially evaporated. What had begun as a poised, polished interview was transforming into a verbal duel. Norah kept her expression steady, but her patience was beginning to erode. Meghan, meanwhile, sat back with the air of someone who believed she'd won the exchange. Neither of them realized they were only halfway through the storm. The tension in the studio had settled like fog. Every breath, every word now carried weight. The polite smiles had long since faded. What remained was a delicate balance of composure and irritation. Two professionals locked in a duel they hadn't intended to fight. Norah O'Donnell took a quiet sip of water, hoping to diffuse the invisible static that seemed to hum between them. Meghan, however, sat tall and poised, one leg crossed neatly over the other, her chin lifted with quiet defiance. Norah adjusted her papers and smiled gently, trying again to pull the tone back to civility. Let's talk about the future, then, she said. You've spoken about empowerment and using your voice to inspire others. What's next for you? More projects? Perhaps another season of your Netflix series? Meghan's lips curved into a small, almost mocking smile. I find it amusing that people are so concerned with what I'll do next. Maybe the world should focus less on my next move and more on what I've already accomplished. Norah nodded slightly, maintaining her calm. Of course, but you've become a public figure whose actions and choices influence millions of people. Naturally, there's curiosity about what's to come. Curiosity, Meghan repeated, the word dripping with disdain. Or obsession, because it feels more like the latter. Every time I breathe, there's an article. Every time I blink, there's a headline. I'm not a spectacle, Norah. I'm a human being. I completely understand that, Norah replied softly. But with influence comes scrutiny. That's the nature of public life. Meghan gave a short laugh, shaking her head. It's easy to say that when you're on the asking side of the questions. You get to control the narrative, don't you? Ask, interpret, edit. Meanwhile, I'm left defending my existence. Norah's expression flickered for the first time. Her professionalism held, but the sting was visible in her eyes. That's not entirely fair, she said quietly. I'm here to have a conversation, not a confrontation. Meghan leaned back, her voice smooth but sharp. Then perhaps you should reconsider the tone of your questions. A heavy silence followed. Even the camera operator hesitated, uncertain whether to continue rolling. But Norah didn't flinch. She'd faced storms before, just never one wearing designer. Heels in an unshakable sense of entitlement. Meghan, she said evenly, I think it's fair to say your journey has been complicated. You've had moments of triumph and moments of controversy. There's a perception. Ah, perception, Meghan interrupted, her tone slicing through the air like glass. People love that word. They talk about perception as if it's reality, but it's not. It's manipulation spun by tabloids and lazy reporters. Norah tilted her head. So, every story written about you is false. I didn't say that, Meghan replied coldly. But most are, and the rest are twisted just enough to feed the narrative people want to believe. It's pathetic, really. Norah sat down her notes, entirely now, her patience wearing thin. She spoke softly, but there was steel beneath her voice. You know, Meghan, I've interviewed world leaders, survivors, and activists who've faced unimaginable pressure. but you seem determined to treat every question as an attack. Meghan's smile was slow and deliberate. Maybe that's because every question is one. Norah blinked, genuinely surprised by the bluntness. "That's not true," she said quietly. "Isn't it?" Meghan replied. "You bring me here, pretend to be interested in my causes, and then circle back to gossip, money, and my family. Forgive me if I don't feel honored." The tone of the conversation had shifted entirely. There was no subtlety left, no veneer of diplomacy. This was raw tension playing out under studio lights. Norah straightened in her chair, her professionalism beginning to crack. "With respect, Meghan, these are not gossip topics. These are things you have publicly discussed. You've made statements that invite clarification." Meghan's voice dropped to a quiet, dangerous calm. Clarification or interrogation. There's a difference in one seeks truth, the other seeks fault. And you, Norah, seemed far more interested in the latter. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The control room was silent. No one dared interrupt. Norah folded her hands on her lap, exhaling through her nose. "I think what I'm interested in is accountability," she said finally. "If you want to tell your story, that comes with questions. Fair, reasonable questions." Meghan tilted her head. "Accountability," she echoed. "That's such a convenient word. It's always thrown at women who speak out, but never at the institutions that oppress them." Norah looked at her for a long moment, the silence between them so heavy it could have cracked the walls. When she finally spoke, her tone was careful but firm. "Do you ever worry, Meghan, that your message gets lost in the way you deliver it?" Meghan's lips parted slightly. For a second, she looked genuinely caught off guard. Then the irritation returned. "Meaning what?" "Meaning," Norah said slowly, "that sometimes confidence can look like condescension, and that can make it hard for people to hear what you are actually trying to say." The room froze. Meghan's eyes darkened, her smile vanishing completely. "Are you suggesting I'm arrogant?" she asked, her voice low. Norah didn't move. "I'm suggesting that your tone sometimes overshadows your words." Meghan let out a slow exhale, leaning back in her chair, her gaze icy. "You know what's funny, Norah? When a man speaks firmly, he's called strong. When a woman does it, she's called difficult. I guess even seasoned journalists fall into that trap." It was a masterstroke of deflection, cutting, dismissive, and practiced. But this time, Norah didn't let it slide. "I think strength," she said softly, "also means being able to listen." Meghan's expression hardened. "Then maybe you should try it sometime." The words hit like a slap. For a few unbearable seconds, neither woman spoke. The silence was electric, pulsing with restrained fury. What had started as an interview was now a battlefield, and both sides were done pretending otherwise. The studio was silent, except for the faint buzz of the overhead lights. A silence so thick it seemed to swallow the air. Meghan Markle sat, back in her chair, arms crossed, her chin tilted slightly upward in defiance. Norah O'Donnell, ever the picture of professionalism, remained still for several seconds, collecting herself, choosing her next words carefully. It was supposed to be a thoughtful, serious conversation. Instead, it had become a battle of wills. The crew behind the cameras exchanged nervous glances. One producer raised a hand as if to signal a break, but Norah subtly waved him off. She wasn't going to let this dissolve into chaos. Not yet. She leaned forward slightly. "Let's take a breath," she said softly, her voice calm but clipped. "We both want this to be a fair and meaningful conversation. So, let me ask you this. When you look back on everything, the royal life, the media, the documentaries, do you ever think about how it's affected the public's trust in your story? Meghan gave a short, disbelieving laugh. Trust? That's a strange word to use considering how the public has treated me. I don't owe trust to anyone, Norah. People twisted my words for years. Why would I care what they believe now? Norah nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing slightly. So, you're saying it doesn't matter to you whether people believe your version of events? I'm saying, Meghan replied, voice rising slightly, that people will believe whatever they're told. That's how propaganda works. It's easy for the press to label me, to paint me as the villain, because it sells papers. And frankly, it's lazy journalism. The word lazy hung in the air like smoke. Norah's composure slipped for the first time. Her brows drew to her tone, tightening. And I can assure you, Meghan, I take journalism very seriously. I've dedicated my life to it. Then maybe you should dedicate it to something truthful. Meghan shot back. It was the kind of remark that cut deeper than intended. The air in the studio turned heavy, charged. Norah blinked slowly, her jaw tightening before she spoke again. That's unfair, she said, the calm in her voice thinning. I've treated you with respect throughout this entire conversation. Have you? Meghan countered, leaning forward. Because, from where I'm sitting, this feels more like an ambush than an interview. Every question has a hidden judgment in it. Norah's patience cracked like glass under pressure. There's no judgment here, Meghan. But when someone speaks publicly about their life, about their experiences, it's reasonable to ask questions. That's how accountability works. Meghan smiled thinly, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Accountability, again, such a favorite word of the media. You people love holding others accountable, but not yourselves. That did it. Norah straightened in, her chair, her calm professionalism dissolving into raw frustration. You know what, Meghan? Enough. I've sat here for nearly an hour trying to give you the space to tell your story. But all you've done is deflect and condescend. Every time someone tries to engage with you, it's the same thing. Everyone's against you. Everyone's unfair. Everyone's wrong but you. Meghan blinked, clearly stunned. For the first time all interview, she didn't have an immediate comeback. Norah's voice grew sharper, each word landing like a hammer. You talk about wanting to be understood, but you make it impossible for anyone to actually connect with you. You push away questions. You insult the people asking them. And then you wonder why people doubt your sincerity. Meghan's eyes darken. That's not fair. No. What's not fair, Norah interrupted, is coming into a national interview and treating it like everyone owes you something. You talk about empowerment, about truth, but what I see is arrogance. You've built a brand on victimhood, while refusing to take responsibility for your own words. The sound in the studio changed. The hum of equipment, the faint rustle of someone shifting behind the camera. It was as if everyone in the room had stopped breathing. Meghan's expression hardened. You have no right to speak to me that way. I have every right, Norah said, firmly. When you sit in that chair and dismiss everyone who tries to ask a genuine question. You want respect, Meghan. It goes both ways. The world gave you a platform, opportunities most people will never have. And yet, here you are, blaming everyone but yourself. Meghan stood abruptly, the motion sharp enough to make her microphone cord pull tight. You know what, Norah? This interview is over. I won't be disrespected like this. Norah didn't move. You're walking away because you don't like being challenged. That's not strength, Meghan. That's entitlement. The words stopped Meghan in her tracks, her face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Entitlement," she repeated, her voice trembling with rage. "Do you have any idea what I've been through? The hate, the racism, the lies? You sit there and judge me like you know my life." "I don't judge your life," Norah said quietly. "I judge your behavior right here, right now. And yes, it's entitled because there are thousands of people who go through pain every day and don't use it to excuse cruelty." For a long moment, the two women just stared at each other, the silence deafening. Finally, Meghan tore off her microphone and threw it onto the table. "This is unbelievable," she muttered, voice shaking. "You people are all the same, pretending to be fair, while trying to humiliate me on camera." Norah remained seated, composed once more, though her expression was unreadable. "No one humiliated you, Meghan. You did that yourself." Meghan froze mid-step, her eyes widening. For a split second, something flickered behind them. Hurt, maybe even regret, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Without another word, she turned and walked off the set, her heels echoing through the empty studio. Norah exhaled deeply, leaning back in her chair. The control room was silent, the producers unsure whether to cut the feed or let it roll. Finally, Norah turned toward the nearest camera. "To our viewers," she said calmly, "I want to apologize for how this interview unfolded. That was not the conversation we intended to have. Sometimes, even with the best intentions, things don't go as planned. But honesty, real honesty, isn't always comfortable." Her gaze held steady on the camera for a long, quiet moment before she looked away. The lights dimmed, the recording stopped, and the room fell into silence. The interview would air in fragments the next day, headlines screaming, "Markle walks off mid-in," and Norah O'Donnell stands her ground. But those who were in the room would remember the atmosphere more than the words. Two women, two versions of power colliding in a single unforgettable moment. What did you think of that shocking exchange? Do you think Norah went too far? Or was Meghan finally confronted with the truth? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you love dramatic real-life interviews that spiral completely out of control, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications bell, because we've got even more unbelievable moments coming your okay.